episode of season 2 of Meet the Toberts. In case you're new to this podcast, we are Daren and Sue Tobert, a physician couple, recently retired, and we are inviting you back into our circle of trust where we talk about thriving in and out of medicine, no matter where you are in your training or career. And together we come to you with over 80 years of combined experience being within healthcare. I'm a pediatric cardiologist by training and a certified physician development coach. And Daren, tell us what.
I'm a sleep medicine physician who previously practiced pulmonary and critical care medicine, and I enjoy personal finance and recently completed a master's degree in blockchain and digital currency. So today's topic, Sue, is about staying left of bang. So what does that mean? You're probably wondering what that means. So left of bang is from the Marine Corps combat hunter battalion or group in which Marines learn how to spot the bad guy before bad stuff happens. So the bang is the roadside IED going off, and the left of bang is everything that happens leading up to that. Right of bang means once the bad stuff has happened, what do you do then? But we're studying left of bang, and we're going to try and apply that as a tactic for helping prevent burnout. So here's the thing, though. Health care is in crisis. It's almost like a war zone out there, right? So this kind of applies. Those on the front lines are the first to suffer, right? They're the ones that take the brunt of the bang. And since the pandemic, now more than ever, we're hearing about the battle that we're in as physicians, providers, nurses, frontline workers, and how our troops are being ravaged by being overwhelmed, overworked, and the whole corporatization of medicine. So we're in a battle, and yet we don't know how to fight against what's bringing us down.
Yeah. Thanks for that intro, Daren. We want to just end this season, even though it sounds like a bit of a heavy topic, on an up note, because in general, what we're talking about is how to stay proactive to prevent injury to yourself, more suffering, moral injury, overwhelm. Things can get even leading from burnout to as bad as depression, suicide, etc. And there's so much in the literature and in the lay press about all that healthcare workers and healthcare professionals are dealing with. And most of what's coming forward is comments about our reactions to it, our response to it, after these things have already happened to us. And we've talked multiple times on this podcast about how to be proactive. So to finish up the season, we just want to zone in on helping you have that mindset of being proactive. Now, for some of you, already damage has been done. So what do you do, right? And this is where you get to choose your battle, choose your moments that you're going to focus on, and decide what needs to be proactive in that moment to prevent you from having more suffering, to prevent the trigger from going off and kind of setting the stage for overwhelm or more stress or unnecessary stress. And there's just beginning to be a little hint in the literature about burnout prevention and this proactive stance that we can take. And what I find interesting about this left of bang concept is that we already practice this day in and day out in medicine in regard to patient care. So a critical child comes into the emergency room and you don't want the big bang to happen where the child decompensates and is in full out code, right? Cardiopulmonary arrest. You are doing everything to prevent getting to that point. You're trying your hardest to stay left of bang, because once things are at that worst possible point, you've engaged the enemy, the child is in full arrest, then you're scrambling to react to whatever the situation is handing you. So we're just putting words to a concept that we already practice day in and day out in medicine. And we're taking the concept and applying it to just the self-care piece, the burnout management piece, or maybe we don't even have to use the word burnout anymore. If we're so proactive, we've eliminated it from the horizon. Um, and the book that we're talking about was written by Patrick Van Horn, and it is a book, Left to Bang. It's about Marine Corps combat hunter training. So you want to learn more about profiling and scoping your environment for danger and kind of staying ahead of the game. What does hypervigilance look like? Even if you're about to engage the enemy, how can you self-manage your own nervous system? All that's in the book. It actually has great application, I think, to what we're doing um, with this topic today. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of times as you walk through your medical career where you're in a moment before something bad happens. So you described it in a clinical scenario. I mean, you could even go back further. Is kind of the whole concept of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right?
True.
It's a lot easier to prevent a problem than it is to deal with it after it's happened. So, we work in our offices to try and prevent the kid from showing up in the ER in heart failure before they code, and so we're constantly applying that medical principle of prevention rather than cure. So we look for problems. We are wired to scan our environment to find the tiger lurking in the jungle before it leaps out at us, right? And so we screen patients, we do tests on well people to find disease at an early stage and so on. So this is really just applying that concept to our own self-care and self-management so that we don't blow up with a big bang. So yeah, and it's harder when the danger or the enemy is less obvious.
Right.
And so that's really the problem here is just maybe lack of self-awareness that we're starting to struggle or that we're having any trouble. So yeah.
Yeah. What as you're sharing that, I'm thinking, how can not that we're saying that corporate healthcare is the enemy, but it's something we do need to be aware of because change is going to come at us from that level. So it's not like we're going to battle to fight our administration. We want to have it sound like what level of preparedness can we have within this kind of system so that we do well and don't take more onto ourselves and create more suffering for ourselves. And so don't necessarily think of corporate healthcare as the enemy because heavens knows nowadays with all that's been going on, that has kind of been in the press as well, right? Thinking of insurance companies as the enemy, et cetera. That is not what we're saying. We're saying be aware of your environment, be prepared to help mitigate your own stress when you're on the front lines as a healthcare worker. Uh, and so it's not about creating enemies with corporate healthcare. But it is hard to know and hard to predict, even day in and day out, what might come at you as a change or as a request or as a new regulation or rule. So, how do you manage that?
Yeah.
Hard.
So, so what would Left of Bang look like in a healthcare environment? Sue, what kind of things do people need to be aware of in a preventative sense?
Yeah.
Talking about self-management,
Right.
self-awareness, to know what to watch for.
Right. Well, so I can immediately think of a story regarding myself that happened several years ago when a father of a patient was so angry at uh, us doing a welfare check on his child. And he was angry because he was a drug dealer and he was running meth out of his home. So he didn't want the cops to show up. But here we had a child with critical congenital heart disease in that home who wasn't showing up for appointments. So we asked for a welfare check and that sent him off the deep end. He called my office, threatening my life, threatening my staff that I was working with, nursing staff, the schedulers, et cetera. And so we notified security at our institution, and they actually ended up banning him from getting into the institution. They had his picture posted around, et cetera. That didn't change my level of stress, though, because he had threatened finding out where we live. We got 3 little kids coming and going from school, et cetera. And I learned a lot when I met with the crime victim services counselor through our local police. And they talked about this state of hypervigilance one can get in, which was clearly where I was, where I was kind of on guard, didn't want to turn my back to anybody, didn't want to actually leave my house, go out in public, had a hard time getting in the door at work without scanning my environment. So I felt that danger, and I was clearly, this interaction with this individual had been a trigger for me. So I was reactive now. But how can we be proactive in that environment? Well, it took me a while to recover to the point where I felt like now I'm going to be more proactive, and I am going to have some heightened awareness, but not heightened awareness that's going to overwhelm me getting in the door at work. I'm going to be a bit more cautious. I'm going to be a bit more thoughtful and aware of my environment. So, growing awareness around your triggers is really important. And over time, thankfully, things kind of settled down and diffused. But there was a great period of time in there where I felt so triggered by that threat that, I mean, you remember that, Daren. I didn't want to be mobilized. I just wanted to stay home and take care of my kids. And I just think of all the people that go through that degree of experience and suffering every day in this country and globally. When we're in that hypervigilant stage and we have so much stress on our plate, which can happen just when we are facing overwhelming work and duties at work, we have to really be aware of what we're sensing in our own bodies, our own minds, and be able to self-manage and self-care and self-calm. And when you're so busy, time and energy is short in healthcare, in our day-to-day practices. It's hard to find time to even just take that bio break, let alone a few deep breaths before you go into the next patient encounter where there may be more demands and more stress placed on you. I don't even know if that makes sense. What's coming to mind as I'm sharing this, Daren?
Yeah, well, I guess with your story about the patient's father who blew up, I mean, what do you consider the bang? Do you feel like you stayed left of bang in that scenario, or do you feel like the bang was his threat happening?
Yeah.
Do you think back on any steps you could have done before that may have avoided the bang in retrospect? I mean, I know you eventually have to check on your patient with the, sending the police to the home to check. But was there anything you could have done prior to that, or lesser than that, or as a bit of a warning to the father, like, hey, we know you're a drug dealer, and if these things don't happen, then we will be sending the police? Like, did you do anything like that, or what do you think? Or did you feel like you stayed left of bang because nothing worse happened?
Right. Well, I think for me, in my little kind of naive place that I was as this pediatrician provider, the bang was the father's threat. I don't think I had ever imagined that. That was not on my radar. So we can't always predict what's going to come at us, right? So for me in that moment, that bang in that moment was the threat that sent me over the edge. And I think that contributed in the long run to some degree of my burnout, is that I just was fatigued from trying to move through all of that, as well as all the other duties that I had. So sometimes we get pushed to the outer range of our envelope, sometimes beyond that, and then it takes us time to recover back into this feeling of safety. But with the learning that I got from it after the bang, and I reacted to it, and I rallied as many troops as I could, including I was advised by security, do the police report, go ahead and see what resources they have, which happened to be the counselor, who was very helpful. Where I landed then is we're pretty, as healthcare professionals, we're pretty bright individuals. We just need to tap into all of our resources at our fingertips. And sometimes that means being okay with being vulnerable. Like there, I went to the victim services counselor. Okay, fine, great. They're better equipped at helping me understand what's going on in my mind and my physiology in the moment with this threat. Why not tap into that resource? So same like we've talked about, use EAP. If you're feeling extra stressed, maybe feeling some depression or great degree of overwhelm, use your EAP services. Don't just put the stigma and overinterpretation of what are people going to think of me aside,
Mhm.
and do what's best for you in the moment is, I think, what I learned from that.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm much more quickly now to move to tapping resources when I know I need help, because guess what? I don't know it all.
Mhm. So not everybody might know the acronym EAP, Employee Assistance Program, I think is what
Right.
you were saying.
Right.
So yeah, most of our institutions have this available as an employee benefit. And if you're an employed physician and feeling stress and having difficulty managing, those services are there, and they're excellent typically, and very, very helpful while you're still left a bang, right? So
Yeah.
that's an important thing that people can do. Um,
Yeah.
so,
Well, and let's talk about some other things that could be triggers, right? Because this is just kind of one of my more extreme examples in my practice experience. I'm just curious, Darren, like, do you have any bangs that come forward for you that created extra stress for you in your work life?
yeah, sure. Through my career, there were times where, especially in the critical care environment, when it's a very high stakes and pressure packed kind of situation, there were times where you have to have it out with another clinician, right? A disagreement over patient care, and I don't know that I ever got to the level of having a shouting match or anything like that. But certainly there were times of stress where just had to, make a separate call to the staff rather than dealing with it right on team rounds, and going directly to the person that you're having a conflict with. So something like that. Sometimes it's just like, ultimately staying part of the team, but letting them have their way with the particular management issue and so on. So those kind of things, and then releasing it, just psychologically letting go of it, and say there's, in medicine, like in most of life, there's more than one way to do things, right? We don't always have to be completely rigid and an ideologue all the time. We can sometimes be open to different management strategies for
Right.
different patients, different diagnostic strategies, perhaps. Whether or not to go back to the OR for a surgical patient that's critical, sometimes is a common one.
Yeah.
But there's no doubt there was stress around that, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
and the tendency to burnout is partially from that too. We've talked before about moral injury, just feeling that um, uh, it was difficult to go along morally with what was going on, and there were definitely times in the intensive care unit where I felt really uncomfortable with the level of care that we continued to push on pretty much hopeless cases.
yeah.
And I felt that there were times where I was a consulting provider, not the provider of record, where I felt they were out of line, and it was time for compassionate withdrawal of care, and so that was a source of problem for me, to continue to run a ventilator on somebody that I felt had no real chance of recovery, without even offering the other options for that. So that was definitely a stressor.
Yeah.
Um, so part of my left a bang anyway.
How did you stay left of bang with a stressor like that? Like, how did you?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because you kind of grieve. You feel somewhat guilty about what you're doing,
Yeah.
and so just being able to, in my case, pray through them
Mhm.
was helpful. Sharing them with you was always helpful, because
Yeah.
having another clinician who's purely on your side and has no interest at all in the case
Right.
is very helpful, just to be able to share what you're feeling, and say, hey, this isn't right.
Right.
And at least that person can then support you.
Supportive
Um,
listening. Yeah, that's a lot of
mhm.
it. I remember us doing that over the years.
Yeah, so having someone you can go to, you know, someone who's been through similar training and similar situations, maybe not in your specialty, or and certainly not connected to the case in any way, could provide a listening ear for you and just general support and say, hey,
Wow.
I understand what you're feeling. I think
Right.
that's just super helpful.
Right. Well,
Validate
and
things and
to clarify, you and I were always HIPAA compliant. I don't care who your patients are. You don't care who my patients are. It's just like, here's the scenario, right?
right,
So
sure.
if that's coming up for any listeners, please know we don't share those details. We've
Oh, of
never
course.
done that. In fact, at our kitchen table, we rarely talked about work. We tried to stay away from it because that was enough already of the day. Let's do some fun family stuff instead.
Of course.
But yes, the supportive listener is really, really important. You mentioned the word grief too, and I think of how grief upon grief upon grief can sometimes get layered on. There was grief around the pandemic, grief if your
Mhm,
patients are dying. We had a period of time where you and I, between the two of us, we lost 4 family members in just a couple years,
mhm,
and trying to take time off to get to funerals and manage your own grief, and it's complicated because it was my parents, and so I think. Busy careers don't even allow time for just normal grieving, let alone you're in a grief-filled career at times, right?
mhm,
All of that is kind of a slow trigger. It's not like a big bang. It's kind of like, we're going to suck it out of you, and then you're going to be totally drained. Really hard with these heavy
mhm.
demands.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, I don't know, because there is no solution for some of these problems like moral injury. Your only solution is for your week of critical care to end and you go back to the clinic for a while. Sometimes there is no end, and so these things do tend to get kind of bottled up and buried inside, and
Yeah,
that's where, again, having someone to talk to is helpful to release some of that. But you go on to talk about how these can kind of be buried deep in, and almost like the part of the iceberg that's underwater,
right.
right? And
Yeah, yeah,
what's visible on top is the burnout symptoms of cynicism and fatigue and inefficiency and reactivity. Being ready to
right,
get angry real easily or something like that. So, yeah, sometimes what we see manifesting as burnout is a result of these piling up of micro injuries.
right.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of talk in the pediatric literature about adverse childhood experiences contributing to how patients respond when they're in pain or they're, given a diagnosis or just simply within the medical environment. And very little talk about how our ACEs, our adverse childhood experiences as providers, might contribute to how we respond to triggers in our environment and how we react. And I think we have to honor that we all come to some degree with all these variety of life experiences that nobody knows about with us because we just go there as workers together, right? And so you mentioned the top of the iceberg manifesting as burnout, and what's underneath that are all these things we mentioned: the moral injury, the work, the overwhelm, the backup charting, the ACEs that we bring to our environment, the grief that's unresolved. I mean, it just, no wonder we are a burnout culture with like 50% of us exhausted and
Hmm.
and ready to check out. So definitely primed for taking this stance of being proactive, staying
Yeah.
left bang. So what would you say, like, what are some of the first steps or ideas for, like, how do you grow your awareness about trying to stay left of bang?
Yeah. So, well, I don't know what you would say, but of the people that come to you for coaching, um, is it do you get a high proportion of people who are left of bang still, or do you mostly get people who have had a bang and they're seeing you as a result of that, or they're just getting to the point where the bang is imminent, kind of a thing? Do people come to you early in their career saying, I'm great right now, but I want to be proactive, or are they usually right a bang already?
Okay, well, you kind of hit the nail on the head because it would be ideal if people came to be proactive. Like, how can I learn to self manage when I might be facing these situations? But I think the nature of human life is that we're often just primed, waiting for a threat in our environment, and then we react or we respond, right?
Mhm.
So it's time to like wake up from that. And I think that's what I love about coaching is if someone comes to coaching and is saying, hey, I want to become a better leader, I want to be more engaged in my career, like really
Mhm.
fulfillment coaching, which I love to do, is when people are still left to bang.
Mhm.
Why do some institutions and organizations refer people to coaching? Because you go get coaching because you need to go be fixed, right? You are already reactive. You're already off the deep end, and so people come already feeling like they're broken and they're exhausted and they're on the road to burnout, and that
Mhm.
takes a lot of backtracking and a lot of heavy duty work. And I'm going to say one other thing. When I work with residents and trainees, and just think of it, what were we like in our youth? I mean, it was just like everything was great and we're just going to power through it and yeah, bring it on, right? At that level of your training, you're like, well, I'm kind of pre-contemplative. I don't know what I don't know, but I'm just going to be out there and ready to go. And why would I do deeper study about how to self-manage and how to make my choices about self-care and how to be self-compassionate? Yet I think that's the word we need to get out on the street. Like
Mhm.
somehow in medical training, we need to not just teach histology and pathophysiology. We need to say, and you need these tools
Yeah.
going into this battleground environment. And
Mhm.
until, if you read the book Left to Bang, until they started doing this combat hunter training, and they pulled people in to do the classes from FBI profilers, from police experience. It was not just military experience. Until they started doing this, they said they were sending their youth out to Iraq, Afghanistan, underprepared. And we need to get that mentality into our trainees and our
Right.
and our med schools and our residency programs. Like I feel strongly about this.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we've identified this in a few areas of life, right? We've talked too about how woefully underprepared young medical trainees are in personal finance, for instance. And you want to talk about a source of stress, just be
Right.
clueless financially and start getting your butt handed to you by the financial industry, and that's an enormous source of stress. So yeah, I think maybe the call needs to go out to our um, trainers, right? Our university professors, our med school professors, and just young um,
Yeah.
staff physicians who are training residents and students.
To the
It's
deans.
okay. It's
Yeah.
okay to talk with them about money. It's okay to talk with them about self-management and about feelings in medicine and how, a tough situation makes the team feel
Yeah.
personally, not just, but we do get so hung up on the science, don't we? And it's all about that. But these are people. And I really feel that, well, we certainly didn't get that kind of coaching
Yeah.
from our seniors. And it would sure be nice to see that kind of develop as a part of the ethos of medicine.
Right.
So, just for some ways to stay left of bang, just to kind of um, give some tools maybe to people that they can start to look at and examine within their own lives and personality. Number one has to be to grow awareness,
Right.
right? To grow your awareness and your self-awareness. And so, um, how would young clinicians start to grow their awareness?
Well, the message I feel like giving is be aware you are woefully underprepared for self managing for the career that you're going into. Uh, Tap your resources, right? So
Mhm.
just be aware that you're underprepared. Like you might have been an A student and top of the class and really good at science, etc. And guaranteed you're underprepared for how to self manage in this career. So wake up about that, smell the coffee about that. And I wish somebody would have told me that because I naively focused on all of the other materials in medicine. And guess what? I lasted 35 plus years in medical practice until I needed to step away from it. That was a slow drain, right? all those little micro hits all those years, and
Yep.
finally it's time, right?
Yep. Yep. And maybe along the way, greater bangs than you would have
Yeah.
had you been more prepared. So, yeah, I think maybe cultivating some self-awareness and, just asking yourself day to day as you're going through your tasks as a student or resident, how am I feeling? Just check in with yourself. How am I feeling emotionally right now? We can get so focused on just the next task and the busyness of it
Mhm.
that we don't take any time, but a few deep breaths and just asking yourself how you feel, just even calling out your feelings and saying, hey, I feel sad, or I feel angry, or I feel anxious, or just acknowledging it sometimes may be helpful, right?
Yeah, the same way that we're trained as scientists to observe our environment, we can turn that inward and observe ourselves, right? You're already equipped to be an observer. What am I observing right now? What am I feeling? What do I notice about my physiology? My patient just died, and they're telling me I got to go see the next patient, and I'm grief stricken, right? The system may not give you time to do that, but you're at choice. I'm grief stricken. I'm going to put my hand on my chest. I'm going to do my heart math. I'm going to remember to revisit this later today when I have more time. That's always possible. Had to do that a million times.
Hmm.
So knowing what your triggers are too, what's going to, uh, be more of a stressor for you and less of a stressor, and then asking yourself, how am I going to respond to this? How am I going to show up? So growing awareness and being aware that you have choice about how you're responding, I think, is kind of one of the first steps.
Right. Acknowledge your feelings and then just choose how you want to respond. It doesn't take too long to do, and just ask yourself those questions. And then obviously another thing that people can do is to reach out to your colleagues, reach out to your fellow students, and rather than talking about the upcoming neurology test, and talk about how you're feeling about neurology. Is it overwhelming? Is it just a lot? Is it hard to get through? I'll bet you they're having the same kind of feelings,
Mhm.
and you can at least spend a few minutes talking about that and the stress of it, right? So increasing your connection time with others is another thing that you can do.
Yeah, it doesn't mean necessarily, though, commiserating and disrespecting the neurology professor who never covered half of what's on the test, though, right? So, what it means is practicing this healthy, kind compassion toward one another. I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to support you, and acknowledge what you're sharing can be sufficient enough. You don't have to fix the other person, you don't have to solve their problems. It's just like, I hear you. This is understandable. Maybe even I relate. Not always do we relate, but we can certainly be supportive and create that supportive listening ear.
Mhm.
Um, so that I call that the positive ripple effect, where we're in a tough situation together, we're sharing on it, and now we're choosing to move forward in a more edifying,
Mhm.
resourceful way rather than dragging each other down. Because suffering begets suffering, right? But if we're kind and compassionate, that kind of switches our brain flow up, and we can be more compassionate with others.
And with ourselves.
Yeah, with
Right.
ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, any other tools that you've got for people to, start to manage their left of bang?
Right, right. So we're going to keep this real basic, right? We touched on grow your awareness, increase your connection time. Number three would be, um, I think it's like managing your autonomy. So this has to do, for me, in my mind, with feeling respected to some degree. Uh, and you might not get that from the person next to you, but you can say to yourself, I'm worthy of dignity and respect.
Mhm.
And the more that we're managed outside, the more we have to do to keep kind of ourselves built up. So where you can make choices for yourself, make choices. Sometimes there's no options, and the environment is fixed, like how many patients you're going to have on your schedule that day. But if I choose to let myself get dragged down into despair because I think there's too many patients on my slate, that's creating my own degree of stress. I might even be giving myself my own bang there, right? If I say to myself, I do have a lot of patients on my plate, and what can I do to take care of myself? What is within my control? how much time I spend with my patients, getting my nutrition in there, making certain that I'm connecting with others to feel a little bit filled up. So
Mhm.
it's kind of like developing your own protocol of self-care, and that's going to let you respect yourself. So often we get caught up in kind of this negative self-talk. You screwed up, you didn't do it well enough, you're never going to get out of here,
Mhm.
you're always like this, you're late for family meals. We beat ourselves up, right?
I'm too slow. The other doctors are faster and better than me,
Smarter, yeah.
right?
So
Yeah.
be aware of that too, and that is really kind of managing yourself and your autonomy and your choice, if
Yeah,
that makes sense.
sure. And then, yeah, caring for yourself just as a human, right?
Yeah.
Humans need physical activity. Medicine can be a very sedentary profession, right? So, yeah, you're going to be tired, but it's important to stay physically active, eat a healthy diet, disconnect from work for a while. It does you no good to stay up 3, 4 hours in the evening doing charts after a full day of work. So that maybe goes back to, self-management. We're going to figure out how to get these notes done in a timely fashion. Or, the other thing I would say too is just when you're talking about a person's dignity is, if you are being abused, you have to fight back against that. There's no, you can't allow yourself to be completely steamrolled into a situation that you can't escape from. So, you've got to just simply take the reins at some point and demand autonomy over certain aspects of it. And
Well, and that can look like taking a break from work, right? We seem to be reluctant sometimes to think that we could take a break. But if things are so overwhelming, then that's time to speak to your manager, your department chair, and really say, look, I need help. It doesn't always have to be a fight. It can be sharing your vulnerability too and saying, I need to step back. My health is not good right now.
mhm,
Uh, and taking that break for yourself so that you give yourself a little bit of space to recover and disconnect from the stress.
mhm,
And generally, well, let me step back. This is a little story, but I see many individuals come to coaching because of the excess work that they have, that they can't complete it within a reasonable amount of time. They're getting notices that their charts aren't complete, their clinic's going to be closed down until they get their charts completed, etc. That creates a lot of stress. Sometimes salaries are docked or put on hold until you get your charts complete. There's lots of different ways that organizations can deal with this, mostly punitive.
mhm,
And so here the individuals coming feeling terrible because they have this workload and they're being wrist slapped about it.
mhm,
And then what happens is they just want to power down and get it all done. I'm going to spend my next 4 days off just doing it. Well, is that the healthiest way? You're still at choice here, and maybe it means you do have to actually take a break from work, or you need to cut back, you need to see less patients. And that's actually been an interesting solution for many clinicians. That's been surprising to me, is that they've landed on, in order to respect myself the most, I need to work less.
mhm.
um, Hard to do, but it's a proactive step for the future. Maybe not in the moment, they've been triggered, but next time around, they're going to be able to more successfully get the work done
Yeah.
in a way that's pleasing to themselves.
Right. Well, one of the things that I've been talking about with young clinicians that I've interacted with is, when you get to that point of being done with your specialty training and you're working out your work life balance and so on, you just simply have to set your work schedule at a level that you can keep up with. If it's just not doable and the employer will not budge, then you either have to look at doing a part-time deal, or you may have to look at another alternative
That's right.
uh, employer, right? So I always tell people that you've got to book enough time with the patient to ideally be done seeing them fully and documenting within that time frame for your appointment, hopefully, so that you're not left with a huge amount of charts at noon, or so you can't eat or take a break, or at the end of the day when you deserve to be able to go home to your family untethered back to work. So
Right.
as young clinicians get into practice, I would really, really emphasize the importance of having a work pace that you can keep up with
Right.
comfortably, uh, and that includes the documentation part, not just screaming from room to room and letting charts build, right? So,
And you know what? If you can't get your documentation done on time, here's another thing that comes up a lot is people want to over document. Where
mhm.
can you pinch? What can you let go of? Where can you shorten your commentary?
Yep.
What's important for you the next time you read the chart, right? There's so many different ways of doing it.
Hmm.
Granted, all while the organization is placing more and more demands for you to perform, right? That might be more of a fixed point. But what can you flex and just be kind with yourself around that?
Right.
Does it have to be grammatically correct? No.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
Right. Well, and does it have to be 6 pages, or can we get it down to 4? Right.
Right.
And even reach out to colleagues and say, hey, how do you do this? Like, I'm having trouble.
Mm.
And they might look through and see that your notes are way longer than they need to be. Maybe there are, I'm not talking about cutting corners. I'm talking about great patient care, but doing so in a manner that's sustainable for you as a clinician.
Yeah, and that takes being a little bit vulnerable, reaching out and connecting, right? Connecting. There's still an
Mhm.
opportunity to connect, and asking each other's advice can really, really grow relationships, which are, on short order in busy days. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, just to wrap, I think I really love the whole concept of left of bang. I think it's a great way to think about the stressors that come at us in life, and you know, thinking about all the things that we can do and apply that will keep us left of bang, and hopefully the rest of our career left of bang, that we'd never have to get to that point
Right.
of crashes and emergencies and so
That's
on.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that takes a proactive stance of preparing, and I think that ought to jazz us up. Like, it's kind of like that. Hey, I want to stay healthy and be old enough to see my grandkids someday, right? This
Yeah.
is part of it, and
It's
it's not.
really
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, it's really encouraging to see this in the younger generation. I think older clinicians like us have seen, as the young people come through, they are very focused on work-life balance,
Uh-huh.
much more than we ever were. We were always just, please let me buy the
Right,
practice and become a partner.
right.
And they were they are far more focused on how many hours am I going to be working, how many hours am I going to be off, how often is call. I want it in writing, kind of thing.
That's right.
And I think that's an awesome development that needs to continue.
Well, that's the generational shift we've talked about, right?
Yeah.
Seeing
Hmm.
it happen, we're seeing it happen.
Yeah.
Um, two more quick comments, and one is that also we want to share that burnout is not weakness, right?
Hmm.
So burnout is an occupational hazard. Take it for what it is. You're in a pattern that's not sustainable
Hmm.
for whatever reason, whether it's triggers, too much work, excessive restrictions to your autonomy, or to your morals. But it's a big clue, which then
Hmm.
those feelings of burnout should lead you to, how can I grow my awareness? Who do I need to connect with and share with? How can I still give myself choice and autonomy and respect, and also take care of myself? So,
Hmm.
um, and I love this quote. I'll share it as we finish up here, Daren. Brian Dyson, who was the former CEO of Coca-Cola years and years ago, 30 years ago, I think, gave the commencement speech at Georgia Tech and shared this piece of wisdom that has been now called the 5 balls of life. And what he shared was this quote: "You will soon understand that work is a rubber ball. If you drop it, it will bounce back. But the other 4 balls that you circle in the air are family, health, friends, and spirit. They're all made of glass. If you drop one of these, they will be irrevocably scuffed, marked, nicked, damaged, or even shattered. So staying left of bang is recognizing that your work ball can always bounce. The rest of the balls that you are tossing in the air are much, much more precious. And we really want to impart to you that whole idea of left of bang is part of keeping what's precious in your life there for you."
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's been a great season.
Hmm.
Stay tuned for more. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.